Please be seated. To silence your cell phones if you have them. First item on our agenda tonight is approval of the agenda. I'll move it.
Second?
Second by Taylor. Hearing no discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Items 2 through 6 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 2 is approval of the minutes of the March 21st meeting. Item 3 is approval of the claims. Item 4 is approval of resolution thanking and commending Sneha Viripal for her years of service with Woodbury County. Item 5 from Human Resources is approval of memorandum of personnel transactions. Item 6 from Board Administration is approval of resolution for a tax suspension for initials BC. I will move the consent agenda.
Second.
Second by Radig. Hearing no discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 7 from Secondary Roads, County Engineer Mark Nera includes item A for action. This is to award the bid for project Perrin 147 to the low bidder.
We received bids last week through Iowa DOT for a project on County Route D12 about 3 miles east of Pearson for replacement of a bridge. The low bid was from Dixon Construction Company for $1,132,113.10. I concur with DOT to award the bid to Dixon Construction.
I'll move that.
I'll second the motion by Radig. Hearing no discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item B is to approve the resolution directing the county engineer to sign the contracts once the signed contract and bond are returned by the contractor for signature.
I'll move that.
I'll second the motion by Radig. Hearing no discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item C is receive bids for project number CP-2023 and return them to the county engineer for review and recommendation.
Do you think we'll have time for that?
Yes.
I guess we will. There's only 2. The first one is from True North Steel of Sovereign, Minnesota. Did you have any, Karen? Total bid price, $130,137.24. 130-137-24. Second bid is from Metal Culverts Incorporated of Jefferson City, Missouri. Watch the county engineer get a paper cut.
Yeah, I kept my blade.
Total bid price from Metal Culverts is $85,987. We clearly have a low bid. I recommend award of the pipe bid to Metal Culverts for $85,987. Oh, first you have to receive, I guess.
I'll move to receive. Second.
Motion by Radig, second by Nelson. To receive, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
I'll move to award the Metal Culverts Inc. for $85,987.
Second.
Motion by Radig, second by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are 5 minutes ahead of our set time, which is the 4:40 PM, item number 8. Let's move to item 14 from Board of Supervisors, Mr. Nelson. You can use this time to read that letter, highlight anything you like. This is approval of a letter to Iowa Utilities Board regarding eminent domain.
Yes, this agenda item just addresses citizens' concerns across this county in regards to the carbon pipeline proposed to come through Woodbury County, and the potential eminent domain use for that project that could be granted by the Iowa Utilities Board, and the potential fallout of allowing eminent domain for a private company. So I've written a letter that I would like this board to approve to send to the Iowa Utilities Board, conveying the Board of Supervisors' thoughts towards eminent domain usage, and also hopefully reflecting the thoughts of our concerned citizens and landowners. So I'd like to just read that to you at this time. The Woodbury County Board of Supervisors is submitting this official comment for the docket regarding the Summit, Navigator, and Wolf CO2 pipeline projects in Woodbury County. The pipeline is proposed to traverse significant portions of Woodbury County, including navigable waters, major public roadways, fertile farmland, as well as industrial and residential areas. A project to transport energy, for example, crude oil, electricity, ethanol, natural gas, etc., is in the public's best interest when it benefits Iowa energy consumers or producers, or improves national energy security. The current proposed carbon capture and sequestration projects are transporting a hazardous liquid and are not an energy product that would be used by Iowa consumers. Additionally, as stated by the Iowa Utilities Board, quote, "A taking of land must be rationally related to a conceivable public purpose," and that eminent domain, end quote, and that eminent domain cannot be used to take property from one person purely in order to favor another. We urge the Iowa Utilities Board to carefully weigh the public good against the potential infringement on the private property rights of Iowans. The Woodbury County Board of Supervisors recognizes the potential need to develop and create climate solutions. However, granting the use of eminent domain to a private entity must clear a high bar of certainty as it relates to public good. Representing Woodbury County landowners, citizens, and taxpayers, we are requesting that the Iowa Utilities Board deny the use of eminent domain for any carbon HLPs or hazardous liquid pipelines at this time.
Appreciate that letter. I think I certainly expect it to pass. The concerns are very common across the state and across the counties, so I think it's helpful for us to have things that we can point to that show the board's intent.
I read yesterday that there are 52 counties that carbon pipeline, in Iowa, that carbon pipelines will be crossing through, and 44 of those 52 have submitted something similar to the Iowa Utilities Board. So I think it's fitting and appropriate that Woodbury County joins that list.
Very good.
It's well-written, and I'd move approval and authorize the chair to sign.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Bittinger. Any other comments from the board? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you. We'll move back to item 8. This is our 4:40 PM set time. We have several of these. Dennis, would you mind briefly summarizing why we are going through these public hearings in this fashion?
Our attorney has suggested or told us basically we should have these 5 public hearings here. We're separating out the projects in ECP 1 through 5. As we go through these, I will tell you which project in each one of these ECP numbers.
Very well. Item 8 then is our 4:40 PM set time. This is an item not to exceed $600,701, general obligation capital loan notes, ECP number 1. We are in a public hearing on the authorization of a loan agreement and the issuance of notes to evidence the obligation of the county thereunder. Is there anyone to speak during the public hearing?
Do you want me to tell you what the projects are during the
Yes.
public hearing? Okay. For project ECP number 1, that includes the courthouse 210 remodeling, LEC network, WCICC annual updates, WCICC APs, WCICC storage, and WCICC series, I-series, and the district health skylight. They total all of a sum of $600,701. These have all been approved by the board.
Thank you. Any other comments during the public hearing?
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
Second the motion by Taylor. Hearing no discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item B is approval of the resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action, which is going to be the same for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 items.
So moved.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. Any discussion?
You want to know the projects?
No,
We're still on
Okay,
number 8.
okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. We're on item 9. This is our 4:42 PM set time. This is item not to exceed $662,969. General obligation capital loan notes, ECP number 2. We are in a public hearing. Dennis?
I'll say ECP number 2 comprises of the Elk Creek Road project. That is the road in front of the development out there. It's one portion of the Elk Creek project. The second one is the 28th Street sewer. That is out on by the new jail, law enforcement center.
We are in the public hearing for anyone else who would like to speak or question the items mentioned.
Hearing none for or against, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item B is approval of the resolution instituting proceedings to take additional actions on the previous item.
So moved.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 10 is our 4:44 PM set time. This is not to exceed $60,000 general obligation capital loan notes, GCP number 3. We are in a public hearing on the authorization of the loan agreement. Dennis?
Okay, this is one project here. It's Emergency Services Truck 205. We had 60,000 budgeted. This truck is already purchased. He worked through the sheriff's department on this. So what we're gonna do is reimburse the money back to our gaming revenues where we took it out of. And the balance left over we'll use for any overages and any other projects. So we got a little bit of cushion there.
Anyone else to speak during the public hearing?
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item B is approval of a resolution instituting proceedings to take additional actions on the previous items.
So moved.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 11 is our 4:46 PM set time. This is not to exceed $276,330 general obligation capital loan notes, GCP number 4. We are in a public hearing on the authorization of the loan agreement. Dennis?
This ECP number 4 covers the sheriff's vehicles. They're actually budgeted in fiscal year '24, but they got cars available, so we've shoved that back to this year. Then we'll reduce their budget during our public hearing by that dollar amount. So this will pay for the cars.
Any other comments during the public hearing?
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
A second motion by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item B is approval of a resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action.
So moved.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. We're now at item 12, our 4:48 PM set time. This is not to exceed $300,000 general obligation capital loan notes, GCP number 5. We're in a public hearing on the authorization of a loan agreement. Dennis?
This one here is a partial for the cameras and tasers. The sheriff's office is updating in the process or completed. We budgeted 300,000 out of CIP and the other balance will be out of ARPA.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments during the public hearing?
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item B is approval of a resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action on the previously stated items.
So moved.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. We are 4 minutes ahead of our 4:50 PM set time on the overall budget items. At this time, are there any committee reports we can discuss? Item 17. Hearing none, at this time, is there one citizen concern on an item not already addressed on the agenda? We coincidentally have 3 minutes. Citizen concern?
Yes.
Okay.
James Loomis, Woodbury County Attorney. I just wanted to take this moment to thank the Board of Supervisors for what they did earlier this year in assisting my office. I just wanted to update the board and let you know that we've hired 2 new attorneys to the office. We are still down 5, and so we are still short, but we are managing and we are making progress. And I believe that the efforts that the board made to assist with that made a great deal of benefit. So I wanted to thank the board for their efforts in that process, and look forward to continuing to work with you. As you can see, the ever-popular Joshua Widman is back, and so if there are any questions that the board might have, he is resuming civil duties, and so he would be your first point of contact, but I also am available if at any time you need me, and do plan to have a presence at the Board of Supervisors meetings at least once a month, just to stay engaged with the entire board. So if there are things that you need, don't hesitate to reach out to me. But again, just as an update to the board, Joshua would be your first point of contact moving forward from here. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Joshua, would you like an inaugural address?
No, thank you. I'm still a man of few words.
Well stated. Is there any other, is there another citizen concern? All right. We are at our 4:50 PM set time, item 13. This is 4 items for action. Item A is a public hearing to levy a general basic property tax rate which exceeds statutory maximum. Dennis, you want to explain what this is and how this isn't an actual vote on the budget itself?
Right, this is just a public hearing to exceed the 350 cap. We are gonna be at 3.89354 per thousand, which is approximately 39,354 cents above the 350. We've been at above the rate for several years now, and we did our maximum levy clear back March 7th, which covers this, but we have to go through the formality of holding a public hearing to exceed the rate. Real basic, we didn't need it because we don't exceed it.
Thank you. Public hearing is open on this item. If there's any follow-up questions to what Dennis just stated or concerns for the board. Hearing none, I'll move the public hearing be closed.
Second.
Second by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item B is approval of resolution authorizing the issuance and levying a tax for the payment thereof. This is in regards to CIP, is that correct, Dennis?
Correct.
Anything to note?
We actually have to do this because we put it in our budget, and we have to do the pre-certification because we actually don't borrow the money till probably May or first part of June, but we still want to levy the money, so we start our payments in December 1st and June 1st of next fiscal year. And these are 5-year loans.
Any comments? I'll move it.
Second.
Second by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item C is our public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2023 budget. I anticipate there being discussion on the following item as well, item D, which is adoption. This item is to give anyone an opportunity to ask questions or share concerns. If there are none, then we'll simply have Dennis give us a summary, and if questions come up, we can allow comments or questions after that point. I know Dennis has a few items, sort of a cleanup, some cleanup motions on a few different items, which won't affect the overall tax rate. But we can go through those unless anyone would like to speak at this point. Okay, Dennis, if you want to give a summary of the board, I believe will have to act separately on motions for receiving the budgets as amended by Dennis's suggestions, and then also other motions, and finally the adoption. So at this point, we can't act. This is a public hearing, but go ahead and summarize so we have that ahead of us.
Okay, our tax rate basically has gone down 1 cent per thousand for the county and the rural, so countywide and the rural. Other than that, the budget stayed pretty much the same. It did go down a little bit because we're doing less capital projects. Our total budget for this next year, before some adjustments, totals $77,546,923. Now, this is a little bit higher than last year because of CIPs. They did go up, and we have projects going on, secondary road projects, some in the courthouse here, so that's the reason there's a difference between the 2 years. Otherwise, most of the costs stayed pretty much the same. We just used cash reserves, some gaming revenues, local shop sales tax to supplement raising taxes. So that'll be handled the following year. For now, that's where we're at, and we do have, after the public hearing, some corrections or deductions.
We'll go ahead and mention.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and mention those.
Some of the deductions, and this is due to the diligent effort of our county sheriff, the jail medical, from the reductions he's already done already. He has an additional $218,335 we can deduct from medical in the jail budget. The sheriff's cars, deputies, that's budgeted in Fund 10, or Division 1061, which is administration. We'll reduce that $276,330 because we're actually paying for that this current fiscal year. The thing we'll have to remember that when we look next year, you'll see a drop there, but in the following year, you'll see it go right back up. So I will remind, and I'm sure you gentlemen will remember that we moved it over to a different fiscal year. Then after we settle the contracts, we have 3 different changes there, and these are all pluses. But we still have a negative going down. The union contracts in general basic, 10,906. This is additional 0.5% what we had plugged in. General supplemental, same thing, $316, and rural basic, $4,275, for a total increase of $15,497. So those will be the action items we pursue after the public hearing.
Thank you. Anything outside of those 5 items, Dennis, that you wanted the board to act on?
No.
Okay. Again, we can't act on these at the moment. We're still in the public hearing. Next, for the next item, we'll have discussion amongst the board, of course, elected officials, department heads. But if we run long or anything like that and we need to truncate the discussion, just want to make sure that anyone attending in the role of a citizen has this moment to speak their piece. If you have something that would basically remain unchanged regardless of the board's vote. In regards to the budget, please do come forward and share your perspective. Public hearing is now open.
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
I'll second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. We are now on item 13D. This is for action. Adoption of fiscal year 2023 budget and resolution. The resolution is in regards to elected officials' compensation. I believe that's what is noted on the outline. And the budget, of course, is another vote. Ahead of that, this is the board's opportunity to make changes to the budget before final adoption. And I would suggest that we start with the 5 items Dennis has outlined individually, get that out of the way, and then move forward with anything else. Does anyone have any questions on the items Dennis presented earlier?
Do you mind recapping them,
Okay.
please?
The
Thank
first
you.
one will be the jail medical under the jail budget, which will reduce it by 218,335. And that will be, knock it down to 1,984,460. And I believe it started around 2.778 million, I believe, in that area. It's been reduced drastically through, like I said, good negotiations with our sheriff.
Do each of these require a separate motion?
Do they need separate, Pat, or can we just go ahead and approve them all? Okay, this will be the first one then. Reduction 218,335.
Can we go ahead and do this one
What
at
are
a
we
time?
reducing that from, or what's that
You're
coming?
reducing 2,202,795 down to 1,984,460, which represents that deduction.
And that what, goes to reserve?
This, all these will go to reserves to help future.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any discussion on reducing jail medical by the 218,335? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 2, not item, the next idea is a reduction of $276,330 from sheriff's cars.
That'll be from the sheriff's cars, actually, it's under machinery, equipment, motor vehicle. And we're gonna reduce that 300,000 down to 23,670, so there's a possibility for another purchase of something, equipment. And that's a reduction of $276,330.
I would move that.
Second motion by Taylor. Any
Is
questions?
there a reason we're not doing that?
No, because you mean to reduce it?
Yeah, or why aren't we buying the cars?
The cars were purchased, they had them on hand
Okay.
this
Oh, 'cause
year.
this was the one we used
Availability,
ARPA
because
from.
cars are tough to get.
Okay.
And it was a great opportunity to get them. So now you'll see in next year's 24-25 budget, this number will go right back up to where it should be. So we're reimbursing reserves, and then we're using CIP to pay for it. So it helps us both ways.
Okay. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Next one is a motion to increase by $10,906 general basic in the line item of,
This will be in the contractual employees, organized deputies, and it's from multiple items, so what I'll do is take the 10,906, and we'll split them down to the FICA hypers, things like that. But basically, it's increased 10,906 in general basic organized deputies for the sheriff's department.
okay.
Then we got their,
Yeah, this is
6%
for the
cover.
board's previously approved union contract
Yes.
negotiation. So that's my motion.
Second.
Second by Taylor. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Next is an increase in rural supplemental of $316. The line item again.
this will be the organized deputies.
Okay, I'll
I think
move
there's
it.
only one, so.
Second.
Second by Taylor. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 5 is an increase of $4,275 in line item.
That'll be the organized deputies again under uniform patrol.
I'll move it.
Second?
Second by Raddick. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else in regards to different line items, things the board wishes to change with the current budget?
I wouldn't mind revisiting either the GIS person or the conservation position that was added. If there's, no desire to do that, though it would die for lack of second.
Let's take it separately. Is there any desire to revisit the GIS position?
Again, this position is shared 60-40 with the city. We pay 40, they pay 60.
Hearing none, is there any inclination to revisit the conservation employee addition? And I would give an opportunity for you, being a liaison, Mr. Nelson, if you had any thoughts there.
I guess at a time when land values have never been higher, I think it's appropriate that we try to take care of what we have and make sure that the taxpayer value that we've sunk into in this land, that we're taking care of it. I think that's what this technician is for that Southwood recreational area. So I would support keeping that position.
Anyone else? Would you like to?
Dan Heisel, Conservation Director. It's just we've been asking for that position for over 10 years. You funded it this year, and we're just hoping that you can keep it because it is very important to us for economic development, what we're doing out there. That's important for the county. You know, you don't see that all the time, but the people coming into the parks and the wildlife areas are spending money, and there is economic benefit there. And that's why we went down the road we did. You know, you talk over $300 an acre is what it's worth. Every hunter that comes in, it's $300 an acre. So that's over $1.5 million just in economic development into Woodbury County. They come into town, they buy gas, they stay in motels, they rent our cabins, they stay in our campgrounds, they go out to eat. So I just urge you to support that as you did and move forward. I know there was ideas looking at that to make up a shortcoming that I had that's on the agenda later. And I have, think I've assured you, I've found ways to address that shortcoming, and we'll work with you on that. But I ask you, please keep that position for us. My board and our staff are looking forward to getting that person on the ground and getting caught up, because that's the only district out of our 3 that doesn't have a technician. And it's our biggest district. It's the most acres. So, thank you. I'll answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions for Mr. Heisel?
Thank you.
Any further concerns from the board on that matter? Hearing none, do other supervisors have any things they wish to change in the current agenda as far as other line items in the budget book?
Well, on the elected official raises, I guess.
Well, we'll move to that after.
Okay.
Just want to make sure everything else gets ironed out. Are we? All right. Hearing no other concerns, my assumption is the board would like to split item D into a motion on the recommended compensation schedule for elected officials proposed by the comp board on January 30th, and then take up the overall agenda. I see no opposition to that statement. Is there a motion on the compensation schedule?
I mean, personally, I'd like to see at least a 60% decrease to see, you know, the board at 10 is awfully high. That puts it down to 4. Others at 2.8. That's kind of more in line with where a lot of employees were at 2.5 or 4%. 4.125, I guess.
Is this for discussion right now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I would move, sorry. I would like to just do the full amount. It's in the budget already. And we're down a penny, right, in the general and county, or just the county, the general?
Correct, and all these wages and benefits, FICA, IPERS, LTD, all that is included in our budget presently.
I would say the full was what I would look for, or a 25% reduction at max. Is what I would submit.
Oh, you can't have a dual motion.
Right, I know, I'm just,
What is the
do we good to
motion?
make a motion?
Yes,
Okay.
to discuss.
All right, I make a motion for the.
Before we do motions, can we discuss?
That's what I was saying, right, can we?
Is that,
Would the board like to discuss before?
yeah, I think
Okay, I
it'd be
just don't want,
appropriate.
people throwing out motions when people aren't ready, and that's maybe what you're talking about,
Yeah,
so.
I'd appreciate it. if I
Okay.
may. Okay. So before we begin the discussion, I just want to say that there's been a request by the auditor that I not vote on his salary due to an investigation regarding a family member, my wife. I don't agree with the conflict of interest because I've never, nor will ever let someone's actions influence what I believe is the right decision as a supervisor. But having said that, for the board tonight to not be distracted from its decision-making, I plan to abstain. But I would like to make two brief comments as regards our salary, if I may. I do think it's unfortunate that we are lumped in tonight and having to vote as a package. We had the opportunity to separate ourselves. And so with that, we're contemplating an increase. It's nearly twice the percentage increase at 10% of our unions. Our unions are between 2 and 6.5%. So I just ask that you be mindful of what we have treated our union employees to. And I'll just also make this statement: if you choose to increase our salary, I will again not take the increase. And finally, I trust this board's decision. Whatever decision the four of you make, I'll stand by. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Nelson, Mr. Bittinger.
I understand what Supervisor Taylor is saying. I'm looking at this from based on position versus political philosophy and/or personalities in the positions. Because at some point, we are just stewards, we'll move on from this, and elected officials will move on from their positions. And so that's where I'm coming at, is what is the position need and merit, based upon merit. Now, yes, I'm not saying it should be every year, but I do think over the last 8 years, the supervisors have taken 3 years of 0%, and the average for 8 years is 1.75% increase. And so I don't see this as a move that will every year will keep increasing more and more and more. I think the five of us are all fiscal conservatives in the sense that we understand this is not a consistent ask every year, and you guys have already demonstrated it's not an ask every year. So this would be to, in essence, to bring the sheriff up and get some of the friction out of how high his increases and get it back within normal range within maybe a 4 to 5% going forward. So I'm not saying it's an easy, right? 22%, that's a big jump, but then again, that's not our setting. We're following Iowa code, and whether we like the laws or not, it is the law. So that's my thoughts. Yeah, we're still putting some money in reserves. We're going down on the levy. So,
Mr. Nelson?
I guess regardless of what we think about the back the blue legislation, it's something we have to work with. I think obviously there was a huge ask to get the sheriff up to stuff last year. We did not do that, so we're kind of in that same boat again this year. I guess I would kind of like to settle that. Obviously, there's probably going to be a raise for that same position next year, but if we could close the gap and finally kind of get caught up, I think that is advantageous. I also looked at, we're lowering the levy, we're putting money in reserves, it's in the budget. I think that was the important thing, was to just keep the levy flat or go down. I think if we reduce this, we can put some more money back in reserves, but when you look at it as a percent of the overall budget, it's very minute. So I think that given the circumstances, I was not part of the vote to ask to separate this out. I would have liked to have seen that, but that was before my time, so that, I can't change that, but, I guess I would probably support the comp board's recommendation this year. I think I've been getting, sure many of us are, calls about assessments. And depending on what the legislation does next year, we're gonna have a tough budget year next year. And I think if we got it to work this year, we don't know what next year's gonna bring. It could be it for a while, you know, so. And I think looking back, with what Supervisor Bridger said over the last several years of what the raises have been, which have been 0, I don't think it's asking too much. So that's my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Raddick, I don't know if you were finished with your comments before?
Pretty much.
Okay. I can support the comp board recommendation, and there's 2 major reasons for that. One is regarding the sheriff's raise. Obviously, this year it's slated at 22%. Last year, we were told it would be fairly high if the board didn't approve the amount proposed, which was even higher than this, and that came true. And as others mentioned, the Back to Blue law is out of our hands, and it is what it is. The police chiefs will be at the wages they are at. We don't have any say in that. The comp board has a duty to recommend based upon other jurisdictions, and that's not going to change no matter what the board does. So I understand wanting to tamper that a little bit, but I also know that it's going to continue to have the same effect. And the effect it's had, I believe, if we want to bring up other offices, is that if I was on a comp board and I knew that certain raises were going to be guaranteed as recommended by the code, then it's human nature that the other elected officials in the mix will piggyback off of that. And whether or not that's stated or not, that's the reality. You can't have raises of 1%, 2%, and then 20%, 30% for another official, and have a compensation board appointed by the elected officials vote, simple majority vote to pass the slate, and not believe that that's going to have some effect on the other offices. And again, not just the other offices, but the deputies tied to the wages. So if we don't bite this bullet, so to speak, this is going to continue to be an issue for the board, and an issue for the comp board, and an issue for the other elected officials. In regards to raises, we won't know what the raises would be proposed as if the sheriff was in line with what the code is suggesting. Would they be the same? Would they be different? That's something that if we continue to cut in half or something like that, we won't know. And again, I think that creates undue tension in the process and undue tension in the outcome. So that, I believe, covers the impacts upon the other 3 elected officials. The second major reason is in regards to the 10% for the supervisors. In the last 9 years, there's been 4 years of 0. And the reason why this isn't as big of an issue as it can be made politically, if you zoom out, which we all say we want to do and serve the community, serve the long term. If the board accepts this recommendation, which is not a guarantee to come back every year, this is a very sensitive issue for the supervisors that hold these votes, and the comp board knows that, and oftentimes the recommendations are all over the place. And so at this time, if the board was to approve their recommendation, that would make the Board of Supervisors over the last 10 years the lowest average raised group in the entire county. And I'm okay with that, because we say we want to lead by example. We want to make sure we're not too far ahead of employees, put management too far ahead. The 10-year average for supervisors would move to 2.4%, and the 10-year average for wage plan, which we commonly know is a little bit less than unions with their step increases and their negotiated raises, would be about 3.2%. So I can live with the fact that the 10-year average shows that I'm in the group that's the lowest raised year over year. And I think it helps to take a step back sometimes as we look at things, and I think this year is an appropriate time for the first reason as well. So I will move the comp board recommendation.
Second?
Second by Bittinger. Is there other discussion from the board before we open it up to other elected officials?
I would just like to say in regards to the comp board's recommendation for the sheriff, I live in the rural part of the county. I think there's 2 towns outside of Sioux City that have their own police, Mobile and Sergeant Bluff. If there's another, I'm sorry. But the sheriffs are responsible for patrolling the rest of those small towns and a lot of the rural roads that I drive on. And as a rural resident and citizen, we appreciate the work that the sheriff's office does, and we appreciate the work that the sheriff does. I was in Fireside, Nanton, 2 weekends ago, and there was our sheriff in there having supper and visiting with people, and that's exactly the kind of elected official that we need in this county. And I think that the last 2 years that some of these raises that the comp board have put out to get in accordance with the Back to Blue Law have put undue pressure on him as far as what they're recommending that he should be given this raise. And people are like, well, why is he getting this? And they appreciate what he does. I think it's time that we just put the nail in the coffin on this thing, get it up to snuff, and move forward. So that's really the big thing for me. Wish it could have been separated out. Again, that was before my time, but as it sits today, I want to support the measure the way it is represented, so.
Any other comments from the board first? Anyone else, I'll say, directly impacted by this wish to speak? All right. Hearing no other comments. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions?
1.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-1, Raddick opposed, and Taylor declaring a conflict of interest. We now move on to item D, the full item. This is adoption of the fiscal year 23 budget. I'll move it for discussion.
I'll second.
Second by Taylor. Is there any final discussion on the budget from the board or the board office?
I guess, my concerns that I've brought up many times, and I don't need to keep us here any longer on it, but, using the amount of reserves and one-time funds and adding staff and looking at the raises we looked at, I just, thought it's not something I want to support, so, and that's just where I'm at.
Thank you. Anyone else to be heard? Mr. Taylor?
I just appreciate everybody's input. This is a long and arduous process if you look in comparison to some of the other governments that we have locally in our area. And I think all elected officials and department heads worked through the savings that were offered in medical alone that we looked at tonight from the sheriff and otherwise, I think are great things. And so this is a budget that I'm going to support. It's very few times that we can, 9 years in a row that we can say that taxes have been flat, and even this year went down a little bit in terms of the levy rate, so I'll be supportive.
Thank you. My comments would just be the same as they were when we reached a flat tax rate. This is extraordinary for the long-term health of our community. And we're all dealing with the same economic challenges to some extent, local governments with essential services and patrol and needs for energy. Is a greater proportion of the county's budget than a typical household. So it's definitely felt by those of us sitting at the budget table. Any other discussion? I'll move approval of the budget
Second.
or adoption. Second by Taylor. Hearing no other discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
Nay.
Passes 4-1, Raddick opposed. Thank you, everyone. Item 15 from the Board of Supervisors. This is from Mr. Taylor and Mr. Nelson. Includes A, for action, approval of one-time funding of $108,894 for certain employees under collectively bargained contracts to receive one-time ARPA funding and direct the HR director to engage in the MOU process. Mr. Taylor, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This item is in response to the employees who approached us last week regarding raises during an interim between collectively bargained for contracts. The board, during the last few years, has sought to keep taxes flat, but it's really too late to increase wages by reopening the bargaining process regarding where we're at in the budget. But there is some of the ARPA money that's designed to retain employees, and we attempt to build a bridge to their next bargain for contract. So this item seeks on July 1st, 2023, to target those whose wages have not been bargained for, increasing over the last year through renegotiations and an MOU process. And instead of reopening, it implements a one-time wage retention bonus. This would be for the 22 individuals in AFSCME juvenile detention, 57 in AFSCME courthouse, and 14 others as recommended by our HR director. And so I realize that this isn't the perfect solution by any means, but we, again, are trying to implement something that will be fair to the extent that we can, and we have these sort of funds available. So there's 93 employees that look at a fiscal impact of $108,894 to include that total amount. So with that being said, if you have a comment, Supervisor Nelson.
Oh, just to reiterate, I mean, that's what the ARPA funds were for, and so I think, it's a perfect use of these funds. We have some extra. Obviously, it's not going to please every single person, but we think it's as broad as we can make it, so hopefully we can get it across the finish line.
Go ahead.
Michelle Scaff, Deputy Auditor. I kind of got brought into the conversation of this potential late in the game yesterday, and I did have an idea that I just wanted to present to the board to see your thoughts on this before you approve this motion. Instead of giving the individuals a $1,000 bonus, which would not be eligible for IPERS, I did talk to IPERS, and if you were to pay each individual $100 per month based on them having worked the prior month starting in July, then it would be eligible for IPERS. This would increase the amount that is on your agenda by a little over $14,000. It would be a little bit of a fluid number. That would be the high point, because employees who started during the month or were termed during the month would not be eligible for that payment. But that would give the employees at least a consistent yearly amount of IPERS that would be included on their salaries without increasing their base wage. I do have a sheet, if you'd like to receive it, that shows those figures of each group. And I did speak with HR and Dennis about this as well, just to run it by them as a potential idea to share with you.
Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, I'm appreciative of the idea. I would ask the board to resist for a couple of reasons. One is July 1st. There may be preference for some individuals to have that as a one-time upfront payment. I did speak to Julie, representing the union, and the complications of I let her know that I have a concern as well from ARPA compliance, whether or not this is going to be seen or viewed as recalculating the base wage. And I believe that we should resist the idea for those reasons.
I want to make sure the board has an opportunity first, if there's any questions we want brought to anyone.
I don't have questions. I have some, I mean, I have concerns. No, but I agree with Supervisor Taylor Nelson about honoring and our workers. I'm concerned, just from being a citizen over the last 3 years watching this process, the unions coming back to the Board of Supervisors during non-wage negotiation, contract negotiations, and asking for one-time bonuses. Not that the bonuses are wrong, that's not wrong for a bonus. It's just, does this set a new precedent of any time when inflation or CPI or even a wholesale index goes up, that the unions come back to us and would like something for their employees, which is, that's their job to do, to fight for their employees. And the bonus is not wrong. I'm just saying, does it set a precedent? That's my concern. I'm not saying we should do it or should not do it. It's just, that's a concern I see from the outside with this. So, but that's not really comment right now.
I guess personally, I'm not going to support this. Last year spent a lot of time with Melissa going through different positions throughout the county, seeing where they were in comparison to not just the private sector, but also other counties. And we tried to make the ones that were low, make them right. And a lot of the positions here were seen as right in line or even above average as to where they fit in the market or even in the county government sector. So personally, I'm not going to support it.
Okay. Would you like to address the board?
Julie Day Gable, I'm the union representative with AFSCME and represent the county employees that are being discussed right now. When some employees came to the board, we didn't take that lightly. We knew that it was, in between negotiations time. We also knew that we had, secured a couple of years contract at the time, and that is worth something. However, with all costs going up, and I understand the county has costs going up as well, but we also knew there was maybe still a way that this could be done, that the county seemed to be in an okay financial position, and that there was ARPA money that could be used. So, if there wasn't an opportunity to increase the wages, yes, CPI is very high and has been for a little bit, that then maybe there could be something other that could be come up with. So I think that the one-time bonus, whatever you want to call it for employees, while there's still ARPA money out there, is maybe a good, I don't want to say resolution, but maybe a decent compromise for everybody, because you want to keep employees and also to make them happy, and that hopefully this would be something that the board could live with at all. We very much thank you for looking at this. And, to be honest, not all counties would do that. And I do appreciate you looking at this, and I hope that you will support it for the employees here. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer any.
How many offices or departments are covered by these employees?
So I'll do the best I can. HR might have to help me since I'm newer. So there would be some, I believe, in the auditor's office, in the county attorney's office, recorder. There'd be some in juvenile. Who am I missing? Treasurer, thank you. See, I knew people would yell it out and remind me. Services? Yep. Oh, yes, thank you. Because, yes, because there are a few of those positions that are, there may just be a couple in different offices.
So on here, we have 93, is that a right estimate? Is there 93, you'd say? Does that sound right?
To be honest, I would have to get that employee information
That's
from
what we
you
figured.
for numbers.
Yeah, in coordination with our HR director.
Okay.
And these are contracted otherwise through what date? How much is left on the current contracts?
How much is left? The current contract expires, I believe, June 30th, 2004.
Not 2004.
Oh, 2024. My apologies.
So
Thanks
one
for
of the
help.
thoughts, I think, is to build a figurative bridge, and this isn't a perfect science by any means, but where there are employees that have, I hate to use the term, not been caught up, because I know that people go into negotiations and there is value to a multi-year contract, but until there's time where there's that negotiation again, this is a way to help out in a way that doesn't look to property taxpayers, and I think holds value for our employees. So I would again urge its adoption. I think it's something that we can do that's reasonable and at least sends that message of value.
And I would just say, I heard the suggestion brought up before about looking at something monthly. Honestly, I'm not sure with the ARPA, which I think you brought up, Mr. Taylor, or one of you brought up, that I shouldn't say we, that could be not an appropriate use of that money, because that could be construed as wages, so just my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa, did you have anything to add, or not unless there's a question for you? Okay. Is there a question on who's covered, how this logistically works?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like clarification on how it'll be prorated for the part-time individuals.
Melissa, if you could speak to that, because I know we had a discussion in terms of how it would work pro rata.
Melissa Thomas, Human Resources Director. What I would like to do would be to take an average of their hours worked. Right now, I do not know how far back the look-back period will be, but it'll be consistent with the last time that they got a bonus last April.
Okay. Any other questions?
So with that being said, if you're looking for a motion, saw that look in your eye, or?
I'm not sure it'll make a difference, but if you want me to comment, I will first.
Sure.
Well, the MOU process and doing things to wages outside of the bargained contracts is an extraordinary measure. The board's taken it in the past for groups that have demonstrated staffing issues, very exaggerated differences in averages. There has been some effort to look into these groups from HR before this item came up in the past, and I think the timing of when these MOUs have come up does matter, because now we're at the point where we're getting down to the bottom of the ARPA funds, and we're having different proposals and projects to use them, and I understand if you see other groups get 4%, the instinct is I want 4% as well. But the board gave 4% in at least one of those cases because there was a critical public safety need. And those were a little easier, I think, for the board as a whole to swallow. That's why you had the votes the way you did is because it was a homogeneous group, typically in one office, and it was a little easier to justify. The contracts still had 2 to 3 years on them. And those are issues where if you don't do something, things are very quickly going to continue. To exaggerate those differences. This is about a year left in this contract. The public's seen that the board does fairly negotiate. When there is a shortfall in the fair wage for union groups, and has done the same for wage plan. But I don't, and one other thing to mention is, I think the unintended consequence of moving so frequently outside of the bargaining process is a shorter and shorter expectation of union contracts that the board is asked to approve. We have several different unions, which is part of our shared issue when we try to be fair, is we have several different unions. And if there's a precedent, to bring up Mr. Bittinger's word there, it's human nature again to just say, well, the board has done the MOU process 4 or 5 times now. It's fairly certain if we just pitch a 1 or 2 year contract and we really try to stick to that, then we'll get something. And if we don't, at least we have a shorter contract to renegotiate. I don't have a huge issue with this, but again, being the tiebreaker here, I don't want it to pass on a 3-2 vote, because in the past, you've seen a more unified board on these, because I think there's been certain dire issues at stake. This, I have heard from wage plan county employees, and I'm not going to out anybody, but I've heard it from more than one that says, what is the point of even negotiating these union contracts if something happens and you just change it? They have a point. And again, the board has taken this action earlier on when there was more ARPA funds to expend, and when there was when it was an issue that everyone in unison came and said, this is an absolute critical issue that needs to be addressed. But otherwise, the economy in general, we all live in the same world, and this is a contract that's coming up next year. It's not something that's going to get away from us like the other ones that had 2 to 3 years left on them. So just because of that, unintended consequences, we know we're not going to be able to make everyone happy, and I see this one with the least broad impetus compared to the others that the board has considered, which again are extraordinary measures. And so if it is motioned, I wouldn't be supportive.
Let me,
Yes.
let me add in. I agree with you, Supervisor. I'm hesitant on this due to the precedent. Not saying bonuses are wrong or we shouldn't do this. ARPA funds in themselves are what's increasing CPI. It's causing inflation. It's government overspending. Regardless, it's not any of our workers' faults or our faults on that. The money has to be spent, and if we have to spend it, I'm thinking about this, looking at it, I would say I'd be willing to support the measure in this. Because it's no one's fault in this room that our federal government produces money, but it's basic economics. The ARPA spending is increasing CPI, increasing inflation, but thus our employees deal with that, having less buying power with their weekly paychecks. And so I would just say, in the negotiations next year, my concern is next year when there is no more ARPA money, will the unions all come back? Because next year we're negotiating, four unions next year? And the rate it's going, CPI, is probably not coming down from what I'm reading. It's in my basic reading and keeping up with economics. Are we going to face this again next year, next fiscal year? And so I want to be fiscal responsive, and I want to make sure that we take care of our employees because they work hard. They do a great job, and like I said, it's not their fault for the economy. So I'd be willing to support it, even though I'm on the edge with it.
Second.
I mean, I believe, I believe in the scripture, I'm a pastor, I believe in the workman's worth their wage. I believe in that. You work hard, you do a good job, you honor, you do in the merits of your job, your pay should reflect that, within reason, within boundaries, but I'd be willing to support it, just, but I think going forward, I think the board has said it pretty clear. I think we will be maybe a little more constrictive and stricter in negotiations going forward, just because of that, but I'd support it, so. I don't know.
I would move it if you wanted a second.
I'll second it, yeah.
Okay.
Motion by Taylor, second by Bittinger.
And just to be clear, to make the parameters clear, effective July 1st, part-time basis, pro rata, with a look-back period as recommended by the HR director.
Well, the board has taken this measure for other groups, for other reasons, and we all know at some point there's a line, and that's different for all of us on the board, and that's why we have the group we do. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. No. Motion passes with Ung and Radig opposed. Item B from the same gentleman is to give direction concerning Ragbri and the county website and discussion of opening courthouse for tours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Do you want to take this away, Supervisor Nelson? This is an ongoing discussion that we've had with Ragbri representatives from the city of Sioux City and the chamber, and some things that came out of a meeting that we had.
Yeah, we had just discussed how can we use the county website to point people in the direction of whether it be camping in our county parks, when they could come to the courthouse, if they wanted to come and tour the courthouse or see that, or other places that we could point people for the information that they need. And I think that we've got a really great website now, and so I think it would be wonderful if we could use that for this big event. So,
Some of the things that we talked about as takeaways were kind of raising public awareness about rural offerings, and so, and this is just kind of word of mouth. I know that we've got thousands and thousands watching on YouTube right now, but if there are vendors or breakfast places, repair shops, retailers that want to list available services, we can act as a conduit there and link into the Ragbri site. And so we suggest placing a link on the county webpage for those interested, and also adding kind of some of the best things to do regarding county conservation parks, and potentially even opening up the courthouse that Friday and Saturday for tours. So I'm willing to kind of work that logistically.
and huge need for volunteers, for that whole weekend. And so I think we also talked about having links to the Sioux City Ragbri website where they could find more information on how to get involved as a volunteer. They have lots of different jobs, so there's kind of something for everybody, I've talked to the president of the Mobile Chamber about Mobile being a place where the support vehicles can stop on Sunday, heading to Storm Lake for breakfast, and they're already organizing and talking to businesses in town there. They were very, very, very appreciative of the information, which I think is exactly why we had this working group. And I spoke with the mayor of Correctionville, same thing, very appreciative, and they already had discussed ideas at their city council meeting last week. So I guess I'll continue to work with some of those rural stakeholders, and that could be a part of that weekend. And then we'll also focus on how we can be helpful to Sioux City and putting on this event.
Is there any objection to having the courthouse open on that Saturday if we have people who are willing to do tours and working with courthouse security?
No, I certainly think, Saturday every now and then is doable, as long as we clear it with people that need to be here. And
That sounds good. We'll work with planning and zoning and our IT department, and then report back to in May, June timeframe, and Probably have one more meeting, so.
I guess any heartburn on using the county website to have some links to direct people?
Of course not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Anything you want to get teed up, send out, just share with us and make sure it gets on the right spot.
Sounds great. Thank you.
You know,
I don't know
flashing
if we-
banners and emergency notifications go out to everyone's phone as well. We got that capability, but,
It's probably a secret meeting at that point.
what's that?
It's probably a secret meeting then if it goes to all of us, right?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, never thought about that. Emergency texts, yeah. Well, we'll have to be excluded from any emergency notifications then, just to be safe. We'll be the only ones that don't know what's going on. Any other questions? Thanks for your work. Keep us updated. Is there a motion you needed on this?
I don't think we do. I
Okay.
think we can just take some direction and go from there.
Okay. All right, no issue with anything there. Any questions from department heads on how we'll facilitate all of these goals? Hearing none. All right, we'll move on to item 16 from Conservation, Mr. Heisel. This is an action item to approval to allocate $350,000 of remaining county ARPA funds toward the Little Sioux Park Campgrounds Sewer Project.
Dan Heisel, Woodbury County Conservation. Sorry about the email today. It's information I got from the engineering firm. I figured you needed to have it for this meeting. I don't know if you got to read it, but we are requesting, or we were requesting $350,000 to help with an issue that was found when we got into the engineering. They started looking at our facilities and what's been in place and found out they weren't up to code. And thus where we were, they were dealing with the DNR as the engineers on Chapter 64, which is on the permitting side, which we're going to be forced to go down, which you have to have engineers do the permitting, and it's a mess. I called the senior engineer this morning after Supervisor Bittinger had talked to me and wanted more information from them, and he had taken the liberty of calling the department head down at the DNR and laid out what our problem was, and he threw another idea at that they didn't know was feasible. I wish I'd have known this when we did Browns Lake. And it's a different treatment system. It isn't a settling pond or basin like we talked. It's actually a biomicro system that's underground, and it's supposed to cut down the amount of septic field you need. There's extra, I haven't had time to even look at this, to be honest with you. I'm going off the engineers told me it's supposed to cut down the amount of effluent that comes out, so your footage in your leach field is reduced, which would help us out. It doesn't help us with our problem that we need this or we need retention ponds. And he did talk to the company and gave him our information, and the company gave him a quote of $325 to $375 if we go that route. If we do the retention ponds, which would be the least feasible or what we'd want, they were talking 300 to 400, depending on what's there for substrate, and we have supposed to be borings going on to find out what's there. I had chose 350 because they were confident that it would be closer to 300. I know there's a concern that I know with ARPA money that there's not as much left, and I understand that. In talking to Supervisor Nelson and Supervisor Bittinger, they got me thinking about some things, and we were going to throw Southwood in on this whole project with the $800,000 that originally to put the project in. That is our least revenue generating park, the least amount that's generated, and we could take that money out that we were going to put there to cover any differences in what you might be willing to allocate towards this emergency project we have.
And how much is that, are we talking about coming from the Southwood project?
That'd be 100 to 150,000 that we were looking at, because engineering for Southwood alone was 48.5. We were figuring another 50 to 75 for construction. And we know that because when we did Browns Lake ourselves a year and a half ago, we know that was for 30 sites. So we know what our costs were there, and we're kind of hoping they'd stay the same. So if we back that project off, and then that's something when we get our rates to increase because of the sewer hookups, build up our CIP a little bit, then we could take on Southwood ourselves later. There's a possible playground that we've been saving up. Browns Lake, the playground is 20-some years old. It needs to be replaced. We were looking at doing that. We were saving CIP money for that. We could go that route as well and put that, we make our payment to Dennis or the supervisors for the loan on the road that you bonded for us, or not bonded, but took the loan for, and then we'd have that money left over. I didn't know if you wanted to know what we generate for revenues. I know we talk about it during budget. Just the camping receipts alone, last year were $187,319, and we had a down year because of the beach at Browns Lake being closed, and the beach at Little Sioux Park we closed due to safety reasons because of water levels. Little Sioux Park, if you look at it, in last year was $109,973 in camping receipts. The year before it was 152. Browns Lake was 27 this year. 21 it was 42,000, but of course we closed everything down as we redid that campground. Then you throw our cabins and all the other stuff that we do in there, and cabins are 65,000 in revenue. So we do generate revenue. We try not to come and ask you for tax dollars for anything. I think you know that and respect that. I mean, you've helped us out on some things. We do pay back loans that we take out from you with these CIP funds. So I think you should know that we can raise those funds, and if we say we're going to do it, we will. So.
We are,
So, wasn't prepared, didn't really look at this agenda item at all, but I was prepared to make some other statements about our financial status in the sheriff's office. I had Jennifer run our daily summary of our accounting, our budget, and I don't know if Dennis, if you've looked at it recently, but because of the delay in the hiring, or the delay in the opening of the new jail, we have delayed significantly the hiring of new staff in an effort to save money. Currently, well, let me back up. Our revenue on expenditure, or on, help me out, Tony, garnishments is up $81,600 from what it was projected to be to date, and we still have 1 quarter left. When it comes to the employee wages and that from what was budgeted, I think we conservatively will have at least 100,000 that we will be giving back, that will be supplemental to the budget. I mean, we're not gonna need it. I also had Captain Harlow check with ACH on our pool refund, which will come, I believe, next month, the end of next month. And the email that they sent this morning was that it would be 123,000. Now, there could be some, we still have 10 days left in that, about 10 days left? No, less than that, 3 or 4 days left for those to come in. And it was the chief that said to me, he said, do you want to let the board know that we have this money that we anticipate coming in as an olive branch to conservation?
I didn't know you guys were at war.
No, I mean, just to, I don't mean, well, I mean, look, we certainly, and I throw this out, and I say this with the understanding that the board, I mean, that money's been allocated to the sheriff's office to spend in this fiscal year. And there are some things that we're going to purchase and have in hand in anticipation of moving into the new jail. So there's some expenditures that we are already in the process of spending down some of that surplus, but it's things that we would have to buy next fiscal year that we're trying to buy currently. But, I mean, we still may have a surplus of several $100,000. So I want you to be aware of that so that you know that now, so that if that's in any way a deciding factor for you as you look at the financial status moving forward, you know that that money is, I mean, I'm very confident that it's gonna be a few $100,000 minimum that we would have surplus, that then, if I understand correctly, goes back into the general basic and reserves. So the chief recommended it, and I don't disagree. It's all county money. If it helps you in making a decision, I just wanna throw it out there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Taylor?
I was just signaling toward our budget analyst.
I appreciate the sheriff, and the fiscal responsibility they have over there trying to save money. I strongly suggest any savings they do, or any department that's in the general basic, we put this back in general basic reserves. In regards to Dan, if he's got conservation reserve money there, I'd encourage using that, because our local option funds are down to $216,000 unallocated next year. Our expenditures for next year are close to $800,000, only $553 coming in. So there's changes we're gonna have to make there. So with Dan's, offering of using conservation reserve and doing some shuffling there, please do that. General basic needs all the reserves they can get, because we have a very tough year coming in 24, 25, and we gotta be prepared. But I appreciate the sheriff and other departments. He'll probably have money left over in county attorney, but the sheriff's gonna have a lot of money there. Hopefully several $100,000, but we're gonna need it for the following year.
What is your, we're considering, materials that hasn't been fully reviewed yet from both our sides, I think. This is, an unfortunate, and no blame on you personally, an unfortunate price hike. We're looking at over $1 million of potentially the last of the ARPA funds. What is the timeline that you're looking at, and what are there dates that we should be cognizant of?
Well, and that's why I think Supervisor Bittinger asked for the timeline on when this started. I had asked about the ARPA money 2 years ago when it first came, and we knew that with the jail that we were going to wait and see where that all settled out. May 17th of 22, you allocated $800,000 for us with the support of our board liaison, Supervisor Taylor, to start this project. At that time, then the assistant county attorney had concerns and did his job, which made us do our job. And it took some time, as you see through that list, working with Dennis, and then when you finally hired that consulting firm, got that information to them, they okayed it the same day they got it from me. And then Shane with Baker Group called me the next day and said, get started. Well, then we started, things don't go as fast as you always want, do they, Dennis? And as you can see through that process, we can't do the work in the summer because that's our revenue generating time. So after September 30th is when we would do the construction and start the work. So we missed last fall, which when we really wanted to start. So then really, once we got the okay, we started pushing it. And I wish we'd have pushed it last fall. We'd have had this issue come up then, and we'd have had more time. You look at 2025, that these have to be, ARPA funds need to be spent by the end of. It's unfortunate, and when I found this, I found out the day before ISAC that this was a problem. Dennis and, I was sitting there talking to Dennis and I don't remember who, maybe you and Pat, I don't know, and it came up what ARPA funds were left. I got back from ISAC, I talked to Supervisor Nelson, our liaison, and he wanted more information, and I got him more, and then we took it to my conservation board, and they approved moving forward to ask the request, and then we got the support of Mark on that at that time. So we couldn't engage really with the engineering firm until we knew But when we engaged with them, that's when they found the problem. And if we're not gonna be able to do it, I'm gonna have to put the brakes on any work we're having with that contract with them. And we're just trying to get this ball moving and knowing that that funding will be there. And I don't know what was left, that would help us, pay for that with ARPA funds, this retention pond or this new biosystem that the DNR says will take care of our problem. I know it's a lot to absorb. The last couple of days, I haven't slept well. I've been trying to digest this and find solutions. I was all set to go and with the original allocation and get this job done. And now the problem. And this will take care of our problem now that we have, that we're not in compliance. And they tell us that for the future, they can size it that we won't have any issues. And I have to rely on the engineers on this because the DNR won't talk to me. They're talking to the engineers.
Why won't they talk to you?
Well, they will, but they want everything done by an engineer when you get into chapter 64 for the permitting and compliance.
True, but
Yeah.
they won't walk you through the process, they won't give you updates, they won't give you details.
Well, they
I don't
will,
understand.
but that's what you hired, that's what we hired the engineering firm, so I'm not gonna call down there when they're trying to, and, because they found a way to work around a problem we had, the engineers worked with their engineers, I'm not gonna mess up the works, so.
Can I ask,
Go ahead.
just
Yeah, you go first.
informationally, what's the gap? So what's left in ARPA right now, based on the prior motion that we just
Yeah,
took?
after today's action, you have $296,470 on hand. Why I say on hand, down the road, probably in October, November, we'll probably receiving some ARPA funds that's under the standard deduction back from the law enforcement authority.
Ballpark?
Possibly anywhere between $900 to $1 million. That's
So-
a ballpark, and we aren't guaranteed, but
Right.
that's what we should get back probably.
But essentially, if we're looking, and I'm just throwing this out there, the gap right now, let's just take your figure at 350,000, you said 296?
Yes,
So we're really looking at a $54,000 gap.
yes. I hate to have you allocate every dollar of ARPA funds in case something did come up down the road. My thoughts are 280,000, he finds a 70.
Why 280? Exactly.
That'll leave you 16,000 left to cover you till fall. If something did come up that ARPA funds would qualify, that could be desirous to do. You want to burn up all the
Just
money?
a difference of opinion a little bit. I'm less worried about having $16,000 in ARPA money, just because it's such a small amount and our uses are so constricting. You know, we've got gaming revenue, I feel like we've got other sources, and we've looked for, what can we use this money for? And then if you tell me, or tell us, hey, there may be 800,000-900,000, I know it's an estimate, but I think this is important. It's the very first thing that I think we came out of the chute with as far as water and sewer and allowable uses. It seems to me like this is something that we can move forward comfortably on. And as far as the gap I would suggest would be 50, 54. Let's use ARPA for what we can. And I'm less worried about having a $16,000 ARPA account. I don't know what we would even do with 16,000. It seems like a pittance in comparison to projects. Just my opinion.
I can give you one example. In our sheriff's deputies for, not our deputies, our civilian jailers, we once budgeted 280. We had to amend that for 70 because there's increased costs and overtime, things like that, that weren't figured in original estimates. So there is always possibilities. Some of these ARPA funds that we do have allocated could run over. Now, it could go the other way. They could run under. We don't know until the project is completed. But you can go ahead and spend it all because there probably will be more money coming back.
Right. And with that, the 800-900 that you're estimating coming back, to me, I wouldn't be having the sleepless nights that Dan Heisel is.
If you use it all, he has to come up with 53,530.
Can you come up with that?
Yes, I'll find it within the project or it will come out of CIP.
The other thing, sorry, the other thing the board needs to keep in mind, just broadly speaking, is, Dennis, have we asked our consultant at all about ARPA funds on buildings, like for emergency services and the needs there?
They're definitely covered. We've already asked them on that because we didn't know if we're talking about new construction or remodeling the present building, but yes, they can be used.
See, if the board runs into an issue where we saw the public's concern about dropping by one paramedic. I can't imagine the strain on our systems if we had a building that couldn't function, which we're being told is similar to the old LEC issues in a lot of ways. And if we can't construct new in challenging year we have coming up, it's just a consideration. I mean, we need to have some way to fund an option, because the board's tasked our county to look into that cost. And, whether it's gaming lost, ARPA, one-time uses of funds over, some of these funds that are over estimates, so we need to remember that, that's easily this $1 million figure we're talking about today. And that's a critical, at some point it could be legislatively mandated more than it is today, and it's a critical need. So we need to keep that in mind as we go through this.
And I guess, don't hate me, Dan, I know you're doing your job, I'm doing mine. It's just, this kind of deal makes me reconsider the whole amount, because we're looking at 800 plus 300 or 350, talking $1.1 million, from our conversations, Kenny and I, on new emergency services building, we're looking at 2.2 to 2.5 million. This ARPA chunk would pay a big chunk of that, and if we get anything back then on the LEC, that takes out a bigger chunk, and then that puts us below the bonding authority of 1.2 as long as the state legislature doesn't change that. So basically, seeing this on the agenda this week really made me reconsider the whole project, which I don't know if you guys have looked at the option of running a 6,000-foot sewer line over to Correctionville's lagoons.
They can't handle anymore.
That's
This is what I was told by the former mayor.
That was just something else that I had thought of, so if they can't, then they can't. But, looking at 1.1 million, and when you look at the revenue increase, it doesn't justify it either. From a business perspective, if you're only gonna gain 30,000 a year and we're spending 1.1 million on the project, that's like a 36-year, 8-month payback, if this were invested at zero interest over that time. So that's just where I'm at. And, I know you didn't intend for it to have an overage of that much, or these unforeseen circumstances. But I thought the 800 was almost a stretch when we initially voted on a dollar amount. But it was gonna be all the parks, and it was a huge amenity to all the parks. And I hate to see you maybe hold off on playground equipment. To me, that's a huge amenity, whenever I've gone to a park or campground with kids, boy, those playgrounds they're gold. So, I hate to see that get moved down the road in this.
There is a playground in place right now. We were just talking about replacing it.
Sure. But those are some of my thoughts.
Well, and hate's a strong word, Keith.
No.
I don't hate you. I respect you. I work with you, and you and I have sat in home furniture on the couch and talked about issues. I just want to figure out a way to work with you.
Sure.
We just haven't seemed to have that support. And I remember when you took over as chair, you wanted to work with conservation for the better of the county. And we haven't done that yet, and I'd like to do that.
Sure.
I don't know how, but I would like to do that. So, but I appreciate and I respect your thoughts. And like I said, I do have a job to do. And
I'd like to make a few comments. So regarding the system, in the email you sent before the meeting, you talked about this new prototype sewer system that they have. I guess, me personally, I'd want to shy away from that and stick with the sailing pond. I think that is something that could come in under budget, and I think we'd be spending those dollars locally to get that project done, and so I would be more in favor of spending the money towards Settling Pond. It wasn't in regards to this, but I was visiting with the mayor of Correctionville on Saturday, and she went out of her way to talk about Little Sioux Park and the economic impact that it has on the town of Correctionville. And I'm sure Anthony has the same. And what she was talking about was with the swimming pond closed last summer, obviously there was less people that visited the park, and the community of Correctionville felt that, and it was tangible. And that's something that they're still talking about, and they're hopeful for the summer that they can get that park full of visitors. So, when we look at this $30,000 in revenue, I guess that's quantitatively what we can say that the conservation department's bringing in. But I think if you were to go and talk to the towns of Correctionville and Anthony about what that impact does for them from May through September, I think it would be a much different conversation. And that's just a reality. Little Sioux Park is, I think, 7 miles from Anthony on 31 and 2 miles from Correctionville. And all the restaurants and shops benefit greatly from people being there. That said, the DNR is tough to deal with. We deal with them every day on the farm. So I understand frustrations completely. We actually have settling ponds on one of our farms, and it has been one of the lowest maintenance things we've ever done. When you talked about a 20-year timeline of cleaning them out, that could easily be 30. So I guess that's my experience with this type of system. That's my experience with the DNR. They're tough to work with, and it's just the reality of the situation. I think that for the rural part of the county and those towns that benefit from the people that go there, I would love to see this project move forward. So,
When's the latest you need to have money in hand to get this thing rolling? Give me a hard
Well,
date.
The engineering firm won't move forward unless they know that we can meet the requirements of the DNR, so my project will be dead. If I was unable to tell them that we can put in either a retention pond or the biomicrobic system to move forward. Our project we've stopped right now, any work with them, told them not to do any more work other than they're trying to figure out a solution for us. They're not moving forward on anything else.
Okay. Can we request a project overview from them? Because my concern is, I would like to see a complete project, a bid, complete, what's the scope of the project, money, because my concern is what else will come up next. That's my concern. And, I'm fine if we can spend some of the ARPA money to go ahead, if you gotta pay I don't know what, down fee or something, just to get a project scope, give me stuff in front of me.
Well, we did that when we sat down to request the 800,000.
Okay, so we have
Because they
all that?
reviewed, we reviewed what we spent on Browns Lake to have sewer
Okay.
and all the septic done there with the lift stations and everything, working with our contractor. We reviewed those with them, showed them that, and then they looked at that, and that's how we came up with that 800,000.
Okay.
And they don't know, I don't know if they would know, Dan, an exact number for you. I get that.
Well, yeah, okay. Yeah, even a ballpark or even a scope of the project, like a plan. What are they doing? Materials.
Well, I know from them, I've got what it's gonna take for them to implement and do everything. It's gonna cost $94,000 for them to engineer and go out and survey the whole site. They're gonna survey every single site, every single sewer location, all that. And I've got that. And we've worked through them with concepts.
Yeah.
And, I asked them on the retention ponds,
Yeah.
and they told me they've done several, and we broke it down. One was 9 acres, and it cost $900,000. So you figure 100,000 an acre is what it cost them, right? And that was with engineering.
Would any of those surveys be worth doing without this project?
What's that?
So would any of those surveys be worth doing? Any planning, is that worth doing without a guarantee that this project moves forward? Are there questions you have on the feasibility, or
I was heavily involved in Browns Lake and worked with that contractor. I know what it cost. I know what it costs. I go back and figure out what it costs per foot to put those in. A problem you run into is you're gonna have a contractor come in and we're gonna bid it. And whether it's rocky, it's sandy, or if it's loamy, if it's rocky, they're gonna charge you more. So we tried to put that in there knowing that Little Sioux Park was the one, it's gonna be rocky in spots, because it used to be a gravel pit. So we tried to look at that and, we looked at those phases trying to figure out what those bids could come, because that's what those engineers do, is they take bids. So I know you're looking for a cost estimate from them, just like we have when we do a building. And we found out that doesn't always work either, because you do have issues, but the only thing we're doing here is we're trenching in plastic pipe to go to a retention pond. The retention pond is moving dirt, and you're either gonna have clay on site when you move the dirt to use as a liner, or you're gonna have to use a synthetic liner. And
Can, I don't know, can county services help move that dirt with their equipment? Is there any way, I mean,
no, and secondary roads can't, because it's not rural basic money, and I wouldn't even ask him that, because that is, Mark's
Just-
here, yeah, he can tell you, that's not even possible.
okay,
Maybe Don Dixon give you a good bid or something.
Yeah.
just asking.
2 questions. Dennis, the 900,000 approximately that's coming back, when is that coming back? Potentially?
When the project's completed, so I'm estimating probably November or October, November.
Okay. And what's the percentage wiggle room on that? It's 800, 900, could be
Well-
a million, we don't know, but that
Right.
amount of money is essentially coming back around that. Is that correct?
I would say so, and the reason I say that, we took over the FF&E and equipment, which was 941,000, which they had budgeted in their budget, is now in the county's budget under CIP, I believe, or the ARPA money, and so we should get at least that much back, because they do have a contingency fund, and I think it's got around 900,000 left in it.
So I guess from my perspective, we're really talking about, we have 1.1 million of ARPA funding. I mean, we know that that's coming back, and we're looking at 296, or the project just doesn't go at all. That still leaves $900,000 for an emergency services building. We already talked about doing it over a 5-year CIP, paid back by gaming, which I think we can comfortably do. And I've never heard a $2.2 million figure. And so I know that we want to talk, as our agenda item said, about what are the needs versus the wants. So I don't want to conflate the two, but to me, I would be supportive tonight of closing that gap of the 296 and expending what we have on hand right now. I don't know that the emergency service building, I know it's not great, but I don't think it's dire. And I think we can build a bridge. So that would be to get us at least talking. I would make a motion toward that line, and people can shoot it down, but that would, unless Dan has a
Well,
better.
could we postpone for a month? Can we wait to see, I mean, other funding mechanisms? Can we, I mean, I just feel like this is like it's a quick, not saying you're doing this, Dan, I mean, I get it, this is sprung upon you, but it just feels awfully quick to me.
Okay.
And whenever I've been in building programs, if it's a quick, unforeseen cost, that's, 40% of the original project bid or potential bid, to me, that's a big timeout and to slow the process down. But that's why I was asking, when's your hard deadline? You've got to have a go to the engineers.
Well, we wanted to start now, so we're ready to go this fall, because we've got to let bids this summer. If we don't let bids this summer, we're gonna have, even early summer, the contractors, they're gonna line up all their work, and we're not gonna have anybody do the job, this fall. And then it puts us back another year, because we can't do the work during the summer.
Right. I heard you mentioned that, yeah.
I've been beating on this for a year and a half, and
When do you need to write a check, Dan?
Yeah, that's.
I won't need to write that check until this fall, after the pond is built.
So I guess my desire would be to let Dan know whether or not to go ahead with the project, because I think if it's just on hold into perpetuity, without a, like, hey, here are our next, in the 2 weeks or 2 months or timeline, then I feel like we'll revisit it 2 or 3 months from now and unless there's an action plan of A, B, and C, so.
I understand, the project itself, like I said, told you, Dan, the merit, I understand. I mean, I use parks, go to state parks, I'm going to the national parks this summer for hiking trips. I get it. The merit of updating the sewerage and all that, I get it. I mean, for campers, I mean, that's fine. I'm just, the cost to me is what that's a big extra add-on.
The original money that was allocated, we were ready to go forward and it would have worked.
Right.
We didn't know that flowies were gonna change or before Dan, I call it BD, before Dan. I mean, all these skeletons pop out of the closet. Whoever put those leach fields in, were they sized big enough for the campgrounds? I didn't know that. We didn't know that going forward. Now that we do, we have to do something about it and to be responsible in the conservation field. And the responsible way to do it is either put in the retention ponds or this microbiome system. That's what the big question is. So the rest of that project would have gone forward, no questions asked until we hit this. What I'm asking for is not the rest of the project. I'm confident we can get the job done. I can't get the job done if I have to take this $350,000 out of the original $800,000. Then we can't do it. And I understand. I will work and I'll do anything I can to get you the information you want.
Well, my last question is, what else don't we know? And that's not a knock against you or these guys. What else don't we know? That's DNR code. That's my concern. What else? And my concern is we prove this is good, and then they come back. The engineering firm. What is it?
It's JEO.
JEO comes back. Whoops.
They've been working with the DNR. They know these people on a name-to-name basis.
Okay.
And they saved our bacon at Browns Lake. I have total, complete trust in this engineering firm and their division that works with the wastewater division down at the DNR. If we have issues with the DNR, any of the rules, now's the time to be talking to your legislators, because they've got Executive Order 10 where there's no rule changes are allowed, no administrative code changes. So if we have concerns with anything, now's when you need to be talking about it to see if we can get it changed. It's not the rules. We're following the rules, and that's why we're here. And the engineers are working with them. They're the ones that have the knowledge. And at some point, I have to put my faith in those engineers, because they're the ones that went to school. They're the ones that deal with it on a day-to-day basis. They haven't let me down in the past. We've worked with this firm before on construction, on sewer, so I don't know what else I can give you.
Just a small question, really no segue for this. The $5 a night we've been talking about, how exactly do you arrive at that? Is that just what you plan to increase the fees to if there's a retention pond?
When we were gonna put full service in at Browns Lake, we looked at area campgrounds, state campgrounds. Private campgrounds are $45, $50 a night for full service. You have to have an amenity there. You just can't have a park without a swimming beach and things for people to do. You start raising prices. But if you have something for them to do and you're selling them a product, you've got a beach, you've got a trail, you've got cabins, you've got green space that they can recreate in, the kids can run, picnic. So with the campgrounds, we're looking at, we're at 25 right now and would go to 30 for full service, would have sewer, water, electrical. And we're working on hopefully wireless with a company right now. So that's where we came up with that. We don't want to get any higher than that and you start getting out of the market. And I still want to make it affordable for those to use the parks. My board does. I shouldn't say I should say my board.
And you don't have any other carry forward reserves from other projects?
No.
No?
I wish I did.
Well, you mentioned some, so I'm just.
Well, I do.
Yeah.
If I have to, I can push back the playground. We can put Southwood on hold until we see where we end up. And if there's money left over, then we do Southwood. If not, we have to do with our CIP. We took on Browns Lake. We did Browns Lake on our own with CIP funds. And we got sewer in there. And so we know what it took. So if I have to take it from within the project and maybe shave Southwood down, we could do that.
So where is this on your priority list? Because you mentioned some things, the board's been, some of us have commented, no, don't do that. If you had to pick, certain things to push off, are they what you just mentioned? Or is this, I mean, is this high enough so that other things would just not get done? Is this something where you'd like to have it? I mean, ARPA funds are nice to have, but if not, you'd still be happier to devote resources to complete these replacements and et cetera? Like, where is this in the grand scheme?
This has been a priority, and we've wanted to put full service. And if we don't, here's the issue. What if we don't do anything? The DNR knows that our septic fields aren't big enough for our campsites, campgrounds. They're 15 years old, 20 years old. What if they fail? We don't do anything today, we don't do anything next year. ARPA money's gone, and all of a sudden, these things fail. We've got to come up with a system, which would be 350 or 400,000, to handle our sewage in the parks. Anyway. Or we'd have to shut the campgrounds down and make them primitive only, so you reduce your fees, you reduce your revenues. So for me, it's a priority. It's a priority for the board, and that's why they so strongly have used those user fees towards these projects to help pay for them. And when we get to a certain size, we can't do it. When there's ARPA money, we took the loans and we're paying that back. We try not to use any tax dollars. And I think you can agree with that. We don't to do these projects. So my priority would be we move forward with this project. The playground, it can survive another year. You start looking at liability, you got paint that starts flecking, and you got slides that we've had welded. There's actually plastic welders, yes, they can come in and weld plastic and make it smooth again. I was really totally amazed. We had to do 3 or 4 slides. But some of this playground is breaking down, and it needs to be replaced for liability reasons down the road.
I guess I'd like to see maybe a commitment in the future to raise those fees by at least $10, so it's at least a 20-year payback rather than a 36-year payback. I still don't think you're out of line with what other campgrounds are charging for the full amenities.
That's no different than raising taxes, Keith.
But this is, again, for, what amenity somebody's using, so.
They can't, and I understand what you're saying, but I think $5 would be more realistic. And then, yes, I just did that off of the one usage of the park of 30,000 for Le Sueur. But then you're also going to get more campers coming in because there are full service, and you're adding other amenities. So you're going to get more usage. So it's going to be more than 30.
Did everybody that used the park dump at the park before? Or did they take it and dump it somewhere else?
I'm pretty sure, I bet you over 95% of them dump at the park, because where else are they going to dump? Unless they crack the valve and drive down the gravel road, and why would they do that when we've got 2 dump stations?
Sure.
So all I can tell you is I know we call it the parade. They're all in line waiting to dump all that sewage and gray water.
Most probably want to dump before they go home or.
Yeah, they would, yeah, definitely.
I just know that some small towns, if you're from a smaller town, they have, at their wastewater facility, you can dump there, and it's usually pretty inexpensive to do.
$3 to $5. I think we had a little town that did it up when I was up in Spencer. They did that.
So Dan, you're saying if you don't do Southwood, you could eat into that $350,000 cost with the Southwood, what it would estimate to do?
I could make
Southwood?
up that $54,000 difference that you're talking about easy that way.
And I think that's one of the beauties of, you've got a conservation board and our board, and we kind of say, this is what we're willing to do, and in terms of all the priorities and shit, your board can help to make some of those calls. So with that, I would just throw out, because I think we've had a really healthy discussion, I would make a motion to do the $296,000 from what will undoubtedly not be the remaining ARPA funds, but will be part of the 1.1 million we anticipate being here by October, November.
I'd second that.
Motion by Taylor, second by Nelson. Dennis, does that leave the 16,000, or does that use it up?
That'll use the 296,470 and draw down to 0.
296, 470.
We'll have 470 in case something comes up.
Sorry, Dennis.
And then, yeah, if is there public comment?
Jana Martins, Mobile, Iowa. I have used the county park for over 40 years, and I've used Brown Lake, Little Sioux Park. I think what this gentleman is suggesting, $5 in the realm of the whole thing, is nothing. If you postpone it, you will look at more money on down the road. So, and I also think that Mark Nelson had a great point. When I go to those parks, I go to Correctionville, I ride the bike path. I spend my money in that town. I've been to Browns Lake. I think it's an asset to our county. And if my tax dollars support that, go for it. Just my thoughts.
Thank you.
Vicki Hall, Smallville, Iowa. And I know that you have Browns Lake and you have Ponca, but everybody that is east of Sioux City uses Little Sioux Park. They come from Mobile and they go east. And so we love that place. And I very much endorse using that $296,000 for this because all my family uses it, my extended family uses it, and they camp there for the weekend, for the week, and use my tax dollars for it, or my ARPA funds, or whatever. Thank you.
And just to be clear, my trepidation is that as a supervisor, we're given so much money to figure out what to do with. And knowing what's on the horizon for our emergency services building versus what's here for this park, to me, the priority is probably more the emergency services building. And I know nobody wants to have to use that building ever, but obviously we've determined that as a need. And that's where my debate is. Like I said, I was struggling at the $800,000 number when we approved it back then. Now we're adding 300,000. So, and again, I'm not mad at Dan for doing it. It's not his fault. And we're just looking at, where the five of us are gonna come up on this, and I'm struggling with it. So that's just my opinion.
And my argument to that would be, I spent 3 hours with emergency services down there in Clemio, so I'm not gonna touch on our conversations there, but in my experience with the DNR, you are in compliance until you aren't. And they do not like what we have down there. We could have an issue in May or June, and they could shut that park down for the whole year and not have anybody come in that place, and it could carry over the next year. And so, and I think that this project not only gets us to compliance now, but any potential growth, there's room there, and we've already paid for that. So, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. I understand your concerns, but we're not worried about the Climate Hill building being out of compliance like we are with the septic and Little Sioux Park. So, and the DNR, they're tough to deal with.
My last question, I know, we beat this horse 3 times and buried him 3 times. Does this system design, that's gonna be designed by JEL, whatever, can you add on to that? Is this system designed to, if we add more spots, you put new sites in, can it handle a growth or no?
When they were doing the retention pond for us, that was our first request, because they're graveling to the north, on the very north edge of the park, we filled in, right under the engineer's property, we filled in a big, we don't call it a ravine, it was a dip, it was where spoils were taken, they filled it in, and it's a natural place for a campsite, right north of the Bellamy. I mean, it attaches to the park. And we said, what if we were to put 50 to 75 sites there? What if we put 3 cabins there? We want this system to be able to handle any growth that we have. Or if that septic system that's in the park breaks down and no longer works and fails, we've got to be able to pump those into that system. So they were talking a 2-acre retention pond to 2.5, and I said, we're moving dirt, why don't we do 3 and then we've got everything handled? I think you agreed with me on that, Mark, that was, if you're moving 2.5 acres, you're putting in 3. So if you're telling me you want a retention pond, and that's what it's gonna take to get this going forward and not try the new system of the bile, we can take that under recommendation.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd go with the retention pond.
What's
Pump,
that?
I agree with Supervisor Nelson, the retention pond. And when I see pump houses on septic systems, I get concerned. And just anything that's new and untested like that, and I'm just concerned the DNR may retroactive
Well, they've got one in, not to
ordinances.
interrupt.
Go ahead.
They've got a big one in place, south of Omaha, there's an RV park off the interstate, they've got one of these bio systems in, and I wanted to talk to them about that, because they're using it, so. But like I said,
Probably
I
will
found.
need pumped out.
Pardon?
It'll probably need pumped out, you know.
They
And-
say it doesn't be, it's like a big biofilter in there, and it treats that, and they bring water in, they blow air over it inside that big chamber
Oh, okay, so
underground.
it's like an MLE process down at the wastewater treatment plant, just on a micro scale.
Yeah, and then the
Well, the
fluid-
DNR doesn't like our MLE process at the wastewater treatment plant either, so. So,
Yes, sir.
Doyle Turner, 2738 200th Street, Mobile. I fully understand your value of the retention plant, but in this type of soil, a retention pond gets extremely tricky. I don't know if you remember, there was a dairy that was going to go in Lawton. That dairy was turned down by the DNR because of the soil that was there, and we weren't talking sand. It was Napier soil, and there is no clay in Napier soil around here. I find it hard to believe you're gonna find clay in that location. So when you start talking a retention pond that has fabric, or if they have good enough soil, they use bentonite to seal it up. I doubt that that's gonna be an option. I know fabric was an option for that dairy. This was a 6,000 head dairy. They turned it down because they did not want to deal with that dairy. I've dealt with some of these new things that you're talking about. I've looked at putting them in. They're not as free maintenance, but in this application, I would not write it off because it could very well be your cheapest option in the long run.
you know, and I guess as a board, do we get to decide that, or is that more the conservation board's decision? And then also, I would probably want to lean on a DNR recommendation as well as JEO's opinion, but, I don't know if that is really do we determine that? I don't know. Maybe this is weeds and we just need to vote on the amount and call it good.
We are lining up borings to see what soil is there. They're also doing perk tests. CDC is being lined up to do that. So we are doing all those preliminary steps to see what's there, because that was the first thing the engineering firm told us. Can't do anything until we do boring, so we know what soils are there, what we need to work with. And, the further you get away from the river, and they're talking northwest we own all that property to the west and to the north. And that's where they're talking about putting it out there. So it gets further away from the river, further away from the floodplain, further away from the gravel source that the river was dumping. So I don't think we'll find clay there. Mark could probably tell us that he hasn't found clay in that area probably forever.
We're asking all the questions because we're down to the bottom, and,
I get it.
if there's an unintended cost that comes up again, we can't have the same conversation. It's just not
Then
possible.
that's on me, right? Well, we have to have faith in our engineers, and it was the DNR that came up with this solution. The head of that department is, Marty was had a good relationship with this senior engineer that called him and said, hey, and he goes, if you do this system, why they didn't tell us that a year ago, but it took the right person asking the right questions probably, and the right person being asked the questions, and they came up with it, so. We can do the testing and do the feasibility study and see which can be the best one to do. And I asked the engineer point blank, which one is our best bet? And he said he'd been studying this, and he said he thought the biosystem would be the best way to go.
Call the question.
All right, I suppose this is just as much about the long-term health of the park itself. He called the question, so you're gonna have to arm wrestle him.
Oh, I guessed, well.
What if we went to Correctionville and said, hey, we're gonna spend 1.1 million? How will that improve yours? Let's make this, maybe they have work to do to theirs. It would also take traffic into town, which from an economic standpoint helps spend money in town. That's our goal here. Maybe we could kill two birds with one stone and do both the community and conservation a good job.
I agree with the statement, but let's figure out the money first. And then I 100% agree with what you say, though.
There would only be 350,000 or 300,000 for that type of treatment. The other 800,000 goes to engineering and the placement of all the sewer lines at the different campgrounds. So it's not like we have the 1.1. I understand, and I would be great in partnering. I understand that, but we wouldn't have any money then to put the sewer into the campgrounds if we took that 1.1 and put it over there.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
I'll give it to you. I'll give you the eye.
Sit down. Maybe this is the start of a working relationship, Keith.
Do we have paramedics on standby for Mr. Heiss?
No, I do want to work with you, Keith, on some stuff. I mean, we got to find some common ground.
Well, again, I'm not trying to pick on you. It's just a priority list is, we have to look at the whole budget, the whole county. And I get that you're in charge of your department and you're going to look out for what's best for it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing the job you're doing. So, thank you.
Thank you, and I respect that. I understand that. It's not personal. This is my job. I don't very rarely take things personal, so it's just the job.
Motion passes 5-0. Raddick not opposed. All right. Any other citizen concerns for an item not already addressed on the agenda?
I will get you information. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I want to thank the citizens for their support. We don't get to hear that very often, so it's nice to hear it. So thank you.
We do. Jana Martins again from Mobile, Iowa. And obviously, I'm here for the CO2 pipeline. I'll keep it short. But to my understanding, there's going to be a board meeting coming up with, is it Plymouth, a roundtable discussion?
Yes,
Is that correct?
April 7th.
Can you kind of expound on that, what the purpose of that is? And
Sure. So all of us can make it to an April 7th roundtable here at 3:30. Some legislators have already said they'll be able to attend. I expect more will say the same. Just want to give us an opportunity as a board to express our budget process to them and also some fundamental questions on one topic I'm sure will be eminent domain and the legislation that's passed or that's pending and things like that. And then we'll also hear from them, so.
okay. And so the board we have a conditional use in place, is that correct, for an ordinance, or, okay. And so, is there any thought process going to putting an ordinance to this with also the conditional use? Has there been any discussion that way?
That was brought up last week, I believe, and was it last week? So,
It was brought up last week. I touched on that. I had a long conversation with Dan Priestley, and we kind of talked about what other counties are doing. You know, currently you have Shelby and Story County are wrapped up in litigation. And so what we talked about at the meeting last week was that if we pass something similar to them, we're just going to enter the litigation with them, which is not responsible use of tax dollars. I think this board is open to looking at when that litigation is settled, if Shelby or Story County comes out on top and what the ordinances that they passed can be held up in court. I think this board is open to looking at those ordinances, maybe passing the same exact thing. But I wouldn't want to wade in to what exactly they're doing when they're right in the middle of a court battle.
Right,
You know.
and so kind of from down at Des Moines, the recommendation was that you have these ordinances ready to go in place, but not signed. Because if you're waiting until, and I can see this being delayed and delayed and delayed till we're down to the wire. It's just kind of the way things have been working out for us down there. But, you know, I just wanted to kind of get a pulse of what was going on here, and thank you very much for writing the letter. Any support that we can have, just like the conservation, we're all about it. You know, our parks are important, our farmland is important, and we support it. So, thank you.
Hi, Vicki Hulse again from Mulville. And I had a nice conversation with Dan Priestley yesterday, and he really explained the conditional use permit. And I don't know if that's going to be real helpful on the safety concerns of it. And the ordinances would be better. And a suggestion was made last Wednesday down at the Capitol building to have an ordinance ready to go, not signed, so that you wouldn't be liable for a lawsuit that you're afraid that you might get sued. But you could have it in place, have the, I think you have to have like 3 meetings, is that correct? To have an ordinance. You could have that all done, have it in place, and then when it's needed, all you would have to do is have your signatures on it. And so maybe that's something that you could bring up at your roundtable and have a suggestion and see how that goes. But another thing, and I did send some pictures to Mark, and it was about how the proposed CO2 pipelines are burrowing underneath the county roads, and they're burrowing deep and causing a lot of destruction. And I've sent him some pictures, and if you want, I can get you the numbers of how many county roads that they're going to be going under in Woodbury County, if that would be helpful to you. Because are you guys responsible for the county roads? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that might be helpful to you if you would be interested.
Sure.
Okay.
We'd certainly receive it.
Okay, well, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen concerns?
Doyle Turner, 2738 200 Street, Mobile. I have an issue with, Mr. Taylor brought up an issue that Pat Gill had talked to him and pushed for him to not vote. I think we kind of pushed the hypocrisy meter all the way to peg. Pat Gill has been sued twice for election irregularities and lost both times. I believe we spent a lot of money to represent him. The last I knew, all American citizens are considered innocent until proven guilty. And I don't think it is correct for anybody to tell our representative whether he can or cannot vote when he has not been charged with any crime. I think that is taking his role as parliamentarian to an unhealthy degree that is unproductive, and I really think it sets the wrong tone for how we as Americans view everybody in this country. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen concerns?
Kenny Schmitz, Woodbury County Building Services Director. The board asked me to provide some information about emergency services building. Jeremy requested that information several weeks back. I have been working on that and was going to come to the board and report that information when I've got it actually all completed, which I almost do now. I got a call from Keith right before half hour before the meeting started and asked me if I had some of that information, and I told him, yes, I do. My estimate's between 2.3 and 2.5 million. I tried, as I told the board I would do, to dwindle those numbers down. After looking at that facility and what its needs and requirements are going to be, those are going to be your numbers. And those numbers don't reflect what your engineering fees would be. So engineering costs would be on top of that. What I did was sat down and I drew a building, spoke to Scott, the director there, got all the needs and the information on what would be required. And then I looked at some code stipulations on what would be required for accommodating the things that we were trying to accomplish there. And that is what I based my numbers off of. There is a possibility that building, that facility could be built in two separate buildings or built in one portion that added upon later. I'm not sure of that because I haven't consulted with the design architect about it, but there's a possibility you could build the office occupied portion of that facility and then later come back and build a second portion of that facility that would house the emergency vehicles. Again, I haven't talked with Scott about how that might work for him, but that is a possibility. But the next step, if the board wanted to move forward in that process, would be to hire an architect and engineer to design that facility. Again, I've designed it, but I'm not an architect. I did my best and I put the numbers to it. I did show my design to an architect and I said, my number's 2.3. What number would you put on it? He said 2.5. And I can provide my design plan to the board for you to take a look at, just so you have an idea of what we're putting into that space. One of the reasons, or there's several reasons why it gets to the numbers it gets to. One of those is it's our 911 backup system offices, if you will. Another is there is a conference room that would be utilized there by the public. They currently use the current facility, the public does, for a conference area for the town, if you will, and also for some other services. They do training out of that for emergency services. So it has some unique things that have to be implemented in that to make it work. So thank you.
Thank you very much for all your work on that. I hope that Mr. Mitchell can be present when you present as well. That'd be helpful. Any other citizen concerns? Item 19, any board concerns?
I don't have a concern, I have a praise, a good report, I don't know what you would call it, but anyhow. I want to give a shout out to Kenny and his department. They've been working with IT and John Malloy up there. There's been the sewer gas issue. That's been a long time concern. And John reported that Kenny, two of your staff, Ryan Kitka and Steve Roeder, did a great job, and they've potentially found a remedy to solve the sewer gas issue that's been going on in the courthouse and in the courts below IT there. So just wanted to say thank you for your hard work on that and to your staff and being diligent on that. I told John when I came in that's something we wanted to look at, and so it's just good to see our county employees and directors working hard and finding solutions and fixing issues that affect our workers. So thank you working hard at that.
Amen. Whatever the solution is, glad you found it. We don't need to know.
Don't
Any-
want that, maybe.
Any other board concerns? Thank you. We are adjourned.